During the post-war period in the United States, there have been huge shifts in the types of occupations that people do. And there's been a lot of work recently on trying to understand what those shifts have looked like and what they mean for the future of work going forward. And what we wanted to do in this work is to take a first step at trying to understand how this shift in occupations and what people do might impact on some of the non-pecuniary dimensions of work. And in particular, what we look at is how work is associated with 6 dimensions of different feelings: pain, tiredness, 2 physical attributes, and 4 emotional attributes: happiness, sadness, meaning, and stress. And the goal of this paper in our research is to try and understand what has this big shift in the distribution of occupations, what does that imply for the non-monetary feelings of work in the aggregate and also in the distribution? Which types of workers, which types of people have either benefited or lost from the changes in the type of work that we're doing? There are some big differences between men and women. So for example, men typically associate factory work, so assemblers and operators, with positive feelings. Low levels of stress, relatively high levels of meaning. Women tend to associate the factory jobs with higher levels of stress and lower levels of meaning. Right? Now, what we do is we can now look at the changes in the distributions of occupation. So one of the big shifts we've seen is a shift for men, out of factory work and farming and into service industries. And for women, we've seen a big shift out of factory work into professional and professional specialty occupations. Now, because of those shifts and because men and women feel differently about those different occupations and also have experienced different changes in the distribution of occupations, we arrive at different conclusions about how this shift of occupations has affected overall feelings at work for men versus for women. So I'll tell you about some of our findings. So for men and women across the population as a whole, we find that the physical toll of work is less intense than it was in the past. People have shifted towards occupations that they associate with less tiredness and less pain. But on the emotional side, happiness, sadness, stress, and meaning, we find very different trends for men and for women. We've seen men moving towards occupations that they associate with higher levels of stress, lower levels of meaning, lower levels of happiness. And we've seen women move towards occupations that they associate with lower levels of stress and higher levels of meaning. So we see 2 very different trends in terms of the emotional well-being of work as manifested through just the change in occupations for men and for women. We then break down these differences by education groups. And what we find is that the gains in terms of emotional well-being at work for women are mostly concentrated in the lower education groups. And for men, we see that the costs associated with the increased emotional toll at work seems to be distributed amongst all education groups. Men and women today, on average, feel differently about different occupations. The shifts in occupations that men and women have experienced have been different. Now, both of those factors contribute to the differences between men and women.